a bird that is just got raised, got too friendly with humans, and isn't really sure if it's a imprint, if it's a human or a bird, and so it's a little bit mixed up. So we have 7 birds, and we brought 3 of them today. We had another owl who was scheduled to come, but she spent the night out in the rain, and she looks pretty bedraggled. I think she's totally fine, but she really, you're like, no, we can't go looking like that. So I think what we're going to do is we'll probably talk about 10 minutes each on each of these birds, and then we'll just open it up for whatever kind of questions or anything anybody wants to talk about when we're done. Yep. Okay. Who do you want to go first, or? No, we never let Dawn go first, because if Dawn goes first, nobody wants to listen to the rest of us. They just steal the show every time.
Will you go ahead?
All right. The bird that I have here is, do you know what she is? Somebody said it before. What kind of bird is this? She's a falcon. Yeah, you know what kind? She's a peregrine. This is the fastest animals on the planet. Faster than a cheetah. These birds, we think, dive at between 200 and 240 miles an hour. They are up in the air and they are just streamlined, and down they come and they find their prey, which is usually a bird, and they ball up their fist and they whack it, and then they catch it again as it falls. Most raptors kill with their talons, but peregrines have a notch in their beak. It's called a toenail tooth, and so peregrines dispatch their prey by biting their neck, biting their cervical spine. This bird is named Rachel Carson. Now, most of you see everybody's laughing. That's very good. If I go to a program and it's not full of gray hairs like us, and I say Rachel Carson, they don't know. They really don't know. If I say Silent Spring, if I say DDT, they don't know. We have to keep teaching that story. You know, DDT is gone, but there's a whole lot of other stuff out there. So we call her Rachel because it's a good teaching point. Then I can explain how she got that name. What do you want to say about that? Huh? So we actually know the history of this bird. Some of the birds we don't. She's from Reggie, which is a group that does rehabilitation and education in northern Wisconsin. So, speaking of Rachel Carson and DDT, peregrines were gone from Iowa. They were gone from the eastern United States, just like the bald eagles. So they weren't extinct, but they were, the word is extirpated, which means when they're just gone from that area. So you didn't see peregrines, and you didn't see much in the way of eagles either. I remember when I saw my first bald eagle. So they, when the peregrines were gone, and then DDT was sort of gotten out of the environment, some of the breeders and some of the falconers, people reintroduced peregrines to this part of the United States. And one way they did that was they would breed the young, and then they would put them in like a box or a scrape on the cliffs or on the buildings, and then they would feed them from the back where the birds couldn't see the humans, and then the birds would fledge and go out. So that went on for a while, and then those territories became established. So we know she's from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. She hatched 7 years ago. She hatched on top of a grain elevator. And we know this because she was banded. So we were able to go back through online and get baby pictures of her being banded in the box. So that's how we know who she is. We know who her mother is. We know her dad wasn't banded. She was flying, and I don't know how long she was loose, and she was shot. This is a bird that was shot. She was taken into rehab, and they deemed her not releasable. So she's injured in the wild, she's not an imprint, but I don't think she was in the wild very long. So when she was taken into rehab, they read the number on the band, they called the banding laboratory, and that's how we know her backstory. Otherwise, we would not know that. So we know she's 7 years old, she's from Wisconsin, she was the youngest of two, and probably wasn't free-flying very long. They either deemed her injury or the fact that she really wasn't in the wild very long enough to consider this bird non-releasable. So I have a statement, so when we get a bird, we have to fill out the papers. The person who's giving us the bird, the rehabber fills out the papers, and a vet has to fill out the papers. And all three sets of those papers have to hit U.S. Fish and Wildlife more or less together, and then we're able to legally transfer that bird. So that's how Rach came to be with us. One of the things that I think is really interesting, well, she's female because she's big. She weighs just under 2 pounds. That's big for a peregrine. Again, tail wag. If this bird had green feathers, imagine this bird with green feathers and maybe a touch of red or yellow. What does she look like? A parrot. She looks like a parrot. And if you look at that now, so as people got more and more into the DNA analysis and less into the old Linnaean classification, guess who she's next to? She's next to parrots. She is not close to vultures. She's not close to owls. She's not close to red-tailed hawks. Genetically, she's close to parrots. And if this bird gets angry or something doesn't go the way she wants, or I'm not paying her enough attention, what's the word? Squawks. She sounds exactly like an angry parrot, and she is very, very loud. And she's keeping track. You know, I go a day or two without getting her out of her mew. Oh, I hear about it. I really hear about it. Yeah.
When she doesn't go to a program.
Or she gets left behind and doesn't go to a program. Or we put her away and we stay in the yard and talk some more. This is a bird who has really bonded with us, which makes her a great editor. You know, makes her really a good editor because she likes coming out. Yeah. So we feed her mostly quail. She gets almost a whole. She gets about 160 grams of quail a day. Yeah, and she's pretty messy here.
Isn't that cannibalism?
Yes. She really isn't. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, you can see her, what makes her really a raptor. You know, these are like knives, boy. She hooks one of those talons in you, and you know, we all wear the gloves. She's got that hooked beak and great eyesight. Raptor is just a very loose term. It's really not a very scientific term. She's also got so the yellow part of her beak is a sear, and in her nostrils she's got these little cone-like projections. So a peregrine that's diving, those distribute the air, so it doesn't, block as it goes in their lungs. Jets have adapted that based on the peregrines. Super great flyers, just elegant birds. So I think that's Rach. You want to do Sarah Owl there, and then we'll take general questions and stuff at the end.
Okay, I'm Star, and this is Sarah. She's a screech owl. And if you see her coloring there, they all come in 2 colors. You see them, this one really blends in with the trees. There's also red ones out there. Yeah. And if you put her up in a tree against the bark, you really don't see her. We have some pictures that we can share at the end on that. But Sarah is an imprint. She's what, 6 years old? 5 years old. And she is full grown. And if you watch her, she will be turning her head. Most people think when they see them, they look like, because they move so fast, they think they can go all the way around. They can't. They can move about a total of 270 degrees between the 2 sides. longevity. But they lose most of, and not just owls, most raptors, you will lose 70% of them in the first year. Either they don't learn to eat properly, they become hit with cars, they get injured in some way, shape, or form, and just don't make it through. So you're always glad when, you know, you get one that lives and makes it through the whole first season, and then their longevity comes quite a bit. This particular owl does not migrate. She stays here year-round, and they will have their own little territory, and they will nest in tree cavities. They will nest in, we actually can put boxes out now. They will nest in a box. They'll use mailbox. Sometimes on your porch there's a post. They can get up by the post. They will do that. And they will use often the same house for years. So unless there's probably maybe too much activity around, then they would maybe probably relocate. So usually if you see them in the wild, you just kind of leave them alone, and they will use that same nesting area for quite a while. But she is smaller. If you look at her, she really only weighs about 7 ounces, maybe just a little more than that. And the males run under that, just between 6.5 and up to about 7 ounces. And she's like nothing on my finger. She's just so tiny. And all the birds molt once a year, so she loses all her feathers, but not at the same time. But she gets looking really kind of ratty. At one point, we don't take her to any shows because she loses like all of this kind of one part, and she looks really bad. Yeah, we do have some feathers we will bring. If you look at the edges of an owl, their feathers are kind of frayed on the end, which allows them to fly silently, which allows them to go in and get their prey that way. But she was an imprint. She came in as a baby, and when they come in that young, they had fallen from a tree. When you have to hand feed them right off the bat, they really attach themselves to the humans pretty quickly. So all of our owls that we have are all imprints. Because of that, they came in at a really, really young age. So that's pretty much it on her. We're gonna let Gonzo and
Gonzo, as we call them.
13.
You ready? Like, let's do this. All right. So I'm Dawn. This is Gonzo. Together we are Gonzo. We have a very loving relationship. We're best buddies. So Gonzo is a turkey vulture who we're not going to be seeing turkey vultures around here until the springtime. They have since left us to migrate all the way to South America, which I'll come back to and talk about in a bit. So he's kind of it right now that we have for turkey vultures here. He is also 7 years old. Right? They're the same age. And Gonzo, she was injured, but similarly to way through. I don't know how well you can see, but couple different kind of reasons for that. One is, again, if something should happen to become lodged in there, guts or whatnot, he can just shake his head and it'll come flying right out. Vultures are gross, so we're going to talk about some gross stuff. So yeah, kind of, again, with the helping to keep him clean, but also his nostrils are up in there, so if you think about what he is going to be going after as far as a food source, it's going to smell pretty bad. He's going to be able to find that really well because that's kind of his superpower. He's able to smell all of that out up to, I think, even like a couple miles away. Really wide smell radius for him. Another feature that we cannot see is his digestive system. Vultures are specially evolved to be able to process, other than a few really heavy toxins, just about anything. They eat dead, rotting things, which, you know, there's going to be a lot of germs and bacteria. They can eat that, they can process that and digest it, and not only does it not harm them, whatever kind of goes on in there, their poop comes out sterile, which is a very fun vulture fact for you to share with your friends and family this holiday season. That also serves a purpose for him. Again, he's going to be walking around in some gross places. His feet are going to get icky. He can poop on his feet, and it keeps them clean. So, we also, I joked at the beginning of COVID that if anybody could not find hand sanitizer, nobody took me up. I mean, it was a possibility. Things got really bad. What else about turkey vultures? Another disgusting thing about them that's fun. Does anybody know how they defend themselves? They aren't really, they're not, you know, hunters and fighters like some of these other raptors. Does anybody know what they would do if they were cornered or threatened? Anybody? All right. Yep.
We see a whole flock of turkey vultures up in northern Wisconsin every summer.
Yeah.
And they spend a lot of time just floating up in the air looking like they're playing tag or something.
Yeah,
So,
they probably are.
so maybe, you know, maybe in numbers they push us.
Strength in numbers kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a good guess, because they are very social. But what I was looking for is that they
she
vomit.
said it.
Oh, yep, they throw up. That is their peaceful, non-violent action.
And it would clear the room.
It's really bad.
It would really clear
If you
the
think
room.
about what
You
they
wouldn't
eat.
take your walker, you wouldn't do anything. You just storm out of this room.
She's not exaggerating. It's really that bad.
Yeah,
You don't want to
yeah.
experience it for yourself. But yeah, if you think about what they eat, it's already pretty gross when it goes in. So when it comes back out, it's even worse.
But it's sterile.
Well, not from that.
That's a good
Not from that.
question.
Oh, if it's undigested.
It's probably not.
Yeah. What else? Oh, I mentioned migration earlier. So vultures migrate all the way to South America. Most of the vultures around here, I believe, go to Venezuela. I've never witnessed this, but we've talked a lot about it, and I've envisioned it, and it looks very cool in my mind. Vultures have to stay over land when they fly. They ride with thermals. So they do a lot of soaring. They don't do a lot of flapping, which works for them because they're so big. If they had to flap their whole way to Venezuela, that would really take a lot of energy. So they have to stay over land. They have to ride the thermals. If you see them up there, like you talked about, big groups of them, you know, kind of looking like they're playing tag. They get up there and they tip around. They look like maybe they are a little tipsy. Their wings are in a V shape, so that's one way to know you're seeing a vulture, is V for vulture. But because they have to stay over land to utilize the thermals, there's a very narrow strip of land between, I think, was Central America and South America, and just thousands of
exactly what she said, they're gonna stay over land, and so they just come through hundreds of thousands of them, millions of them. It's amazing.
That's how they do in Arizona. They come through a town called Bisbee, Arizona, and they put up, they organize a big festival. That's how they come through in that quantity. It's a huge.
Yeah, I
they draw
think
in
if
people.
they're in Arizona, most of them are gonna be black. I think that's black, and turkey vultures tend to be more on the eastern, mid-eastern side. But they look a lot alike, and they act a lot alike.
So, before we wrap up though, I always like to ask people to guess, what do you think Gonzo weighs? Throw out a number.
8 pounds.
8? Anybody else?
3.
3? I know, right in the middle, he's about 5 pounds. You guys guessed a lot better than most people, sometimes, what's
50 pounds.
Yeah, somebody guessed one was like 100 pounds, and I was like, thank you. That's not that strong. Yeah, he's only about 5 pounds, which is surprising to some folks. You guys were pretty close in there, but he's so big. He has so many feathers. That wingspan is impressive. About 6 feet, not quite on that, stretching. So yeah, that all serves to help them fly long distances, to soar, to migrate, and do all the wonderful things that vultures do.
A couple of years ago, we took, I think it was the same 3, to a program at the library, and it was kids, and it was really kind of raucous, and they were not paying any attention to the audience. They were doing like what they're doing here. They were breathing and stretching, and I realized that it was winter, and we were inside, and it was warm. And so they were kind of luxuriating, cleaning up in the warmth, and they didn't really not care what was going on in the audience at all, because they were just happy to be warm.
If they're healthy and fed like now, how long do they live usually?
So the question is, how long do they live? It varies with the species, and as Sarah said, you've got about a 70% mortality on all these birds in that first year or so. The reasons just go on and on and on, and we fellow humans are responsible for most of it. Beyond that, peregrines will get in their 20s, screeches, maybe teens. Vultures, nobody really knows as much because, nobody really bans vultures. You can't ban them on their legs because of the way they poop. So some of them get, yeah. But we do know that there was one captive vulture who lived at least 45 years. And as far as I know, he's still going. That's Nero at the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota. So we'll see. In the wild, barred owls, I'm sorry, not bards, but great horns can get in their late 20s, bald eagles can get up into their 30s. And again, we only know that from birds that have been banded and are recovered a lot of older shit sometimes. So yeah, it's just amazing. Stretch. Other questions? Yeah.
Good. I thought I read somewhere that some species of vultures locate their food by sight. Is that right? Or are they all by smell?
I'm not sure, it could be. I think smell is kind of the main resource, but
Yeah,
it could
so
be.
I'm not sure about, so there are 6 or 7 species of what's called New World vultures. And in the U.S., that would be the blacks and the turkeys and the California condor. So I'm not as sure about the Old World vultures because they're kind of different. I think that the turkey vultures are for sure by smell. The black vultures will often watch the turkey vultures. And if the turkey vultures are on something, they'll move over. So it's at least a little bit by sight. Yeah, there's a question for that.
Growing up in Iowa City, I never saw a vulture. And now they're all over the place.
Yep.
What changed?
What changed? I'm not entirely sure, but that's a common thing. I mean, people say, we never saw them. I never saw them. And the numbers are clearly up. I don't know, better resources, more junk, more food, more dead stuff that they're doing well, less people shooting them, I think there could be a lot of reasons, but if you read Alfred Bent, I think it is, who's an old historian who's published all these books on all kinds of birds as part of the 1930s, part of the, I don't know if that would be works product, one of those things in the 1930s. And I think that's all digitalized online, and you can look at it. He talks about the vultures. He talks about the vultures all the way in Canada. People were seeing them. There's an old, I think it's a pictograph or petrograph, I don't remember. Maybe it's a petrograph.
Rachel says yes.
Yes, of a turkey vulture in Wisconsin that indigenous people must have carved. So yes, they have a long history of coming up this Midwest flyway, but the numbers were never what they are now. That's the best I can answer that. Yeah.
What's the size of that vulture compared to the eagle? Bald eagles?
Boy, he's close. Like a southern eagle, like a Florida eagle, wingspan might be about the same. Midwest, northern eagle is going to a larger wingspan, but not necessarily by a whole lot. They're also going to weigh more in general. The difference is these guys are two-tone, and V stands for vulture, and vultures, like she was saying, do this tippy like I'm the little drunk. It stabilizes them. Thank you, Rachel, for being so good. It stabilizes them. I mean, because these guys don't flap much. Bald eagles are flat. Boy, when they're soaring, and they can flap too, but when they're soaring, they are flat. And also, quite conveniently, the vultures have gone as more of the eagles are coming in, and that'll reverse in spring. It's not like one group's chasing the other out. It's just different use of the habitat. Besides the fact that it's harder for them to find food, you don't get as many thermals in the winter, right? Because the sun is lower, and so you don't get those warm air. And so if you're more or less an obligate soarer, you have a harder time. I learned that from my kids' book. Yeah.
I saw a program on falconry in Mongolia, where they train the falcons, but then after they hunt them for 2 years, they release them back.
10. It's 10 years. They keep them 10 years, and then they release them, yes.
And why can't you take one that's been domesticated, or is the training way different?
Why she couldn't be taught to go back out? Well, the injured birds, that's clearly out. I think there's some people who believe that you could rehabilitate an imprinted bird. But Gans is just, for example, he's not really interested in rehabbing himself as he's pretty much adapted to the life he knows. And I think that's somewhat true with the owls as well. I think that there are falconers who do sometimes work in conjunction with rehabbers and will help with the final part of rehab so that those birds are safe when they go out. And, I'm never going to be a falconer. It's just not my thing. But I have a lot of falconer friends because a lot of the rehabbers are falconers. And for a lot of the falconers, what they're really interested in doing is flying that bird, helping that bird. So if you're I know the Wisconsin rules better than the Iowa, but I think they're close. You have to catch either a red tail or a kestrel the first year. You have to catch your own bird, and you can only catch it during a certain period of time, and it has to be a bird of that year. And so the falconers will tell you that most of the birds that they catch are birds that are not doing well. Because if the bird was doing well, it wouldn't come down. So they feel they're really helping it by making that bird survive, and they hunt with those birds. And many of the falconers, after 2-3 years, do what they call flip them, and they turn that bird out. Because that bird knows how to hunt. And for some of the falconers, it's this relationship with the bird. I think my friend Frank has had men for probably well over 20 years, the same red tail. But other people get new birds every 2 or 3 years. The pleasure is the bonding with the bird and the training the bird. And then in a couple of years, they're ready to start that process again, and they free their bird. Yeah.
Is there any evidence of climate change? Is there some distribution of any of these birds?
You know, not yet, but I bet it will. And it may already. So what happens with a lot of things in climate change on the birds is it's a mismatch. So if you're a little warbler and you're coming, and the insect hatch no longer times with the time that you arrive, the insects, got hatched earlier because of climate change, you're pretty hungry when you get here. So there's those kinds of mismatch. There's destruction through climate change of habitat changes. The tree line changes, the warmth changes, the tundra melts. It's going to have a profound effect. If you look, they say, I don't remember which organization did it. I don't know if it's Audubon or Audubon in conjunction with Natural Bird Conserving, sorry. I don't know. We've lost 30% of our birds in the last 50 years. 30% in 50 years. 50. Even so. Raptors, other than kestrels, seem to be doing really well. And that's maybe because people have been real interested in them, and there's lots of raptor programs, and I think the population people understand better, people are happy to see the eagles back, DDT's gone. But songbirds? Oh, the other birds that are doing well are the ducks. And one of the reasons that birds like the ducks are doing well is you gotta hand it to the duck hunters. They have to buy a duck stamp to hunt. And all the money from the duck stamps, I don't know how much they are, goes into habitat conservation. So that's exactly where it should go. So those guys are doing pretty well, raptors are doing really well, rest of the stuff, not good. Climate change, windows, habitat destruction, change in farming practices, the windrows, the stuff what we always used to see, places that were sort of left natural. Well, everything's getting farmed now. Cars, poisons, fishing line, the list goes on. Cats. Keep your cats in.
You can land in your
And
bullets too.
there you go. Thank you, Sarah, for adding that. Yeah. If you're going to shoot with copper.
They seem to have such different focal points. Like I'm watching them as they watch, as they look out. So Sarah's face pretty focused in like right where she's focused, and then everyone else depends on what else is happening.
Right.
They should be, there's movement. You don't see.
Yeah. She's an owl.
She's a small owl. She's pretty
small owl.
She's all over.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened, but I read about a vulture that got inside of a car. And apparently started vomiting and just shaking its head and going everywhere. And I don't think they ever got the car.
I would believe that. I would believe that story. Yeah. It's really pretty bad. He's only done that once or twice. A couple times he's gobbled food down and then, bounced around and spit the food back out. That's not bad. But anything that's been in there for a while is, I have a friend who is a vulture, and she's been really one of my mentors. She does not feed her vulture the day before programs.
So for feeding that, you just wait till the meat rots before you give it to them? Or?
No. They actually prefer it not super they don't mind if it's, you know, a little aged, but no, we're real careful with feeding.
Well, tell them about the shipment you got.
Oh, yes, Sarah really wanted me to tell this. So we buy quail. I was looking at it today, and I think the quail is $3.80 a quail, a bird. So we buy that. We buy mice. They're about $1.09 a piece. And, you know, we go through probably 8 or 9 mice a day, plus quail. And then sometimes we get free food. We're careful what we take.
Are these live ones?
No, we only feed them. And then we get some rats from the sleep lab at the university. And then we get, this is Sarah's favorite, gophers.
Oh.
You know, real gophers, not the 16-line ground squirrels, but the pocket gophers, stuck one in there. So there's a guy I met through a guy who was doing some work for me back when I lived in Wisconsin, and he said he really loved the birds, and he said, you ought to meet my brother-in-law, he's a professional gopher trapper. So he traps, and bless him, he throws them all in the freezer, and we rendezvous. He comes down to deer hunt in Wisconsin, and we rendezvous at Fleet Farm, and I give him a little gas money. He doesn't take very much. And I got 250 gophers this year. My best year was 500. That was great. And they're trapped. So they're, you know, they aren't poison. We don't have to worry about like poisoning or anything like that. I think this guy's very ethical. He also gets a bounty on them. He cuts off their little front paws and gets paid a bounty. So, and he you know, does the farm fields for people. So he's getting a little bit, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I really hope he does it because it's a great food source. I feel like it's using something from nature, and I feel like it would go to waste otherwise. So, and most of the gophers go to guns.
How magic likes the gopher.
And the Merlin likes gopher.
The Merlin definitely.
The Merlin likes gopher. The big owl eats gopher. But I sort of portion them out because they're the ones I can't replace until next year. Whereas the quail and the stuff the quail and the mice I just periodically put in orders, and they come in big boxes. And the quail have styrofoam and dried ice in there. And I really hate the styrofoam. And then the rodents come wrapped in a box with insulation, that they have wrapped the insulation in plastic. And then the dry ice in the middle, and everything, knock on wood, has made it frozen.
Are those styrofoam boxes, how big are they?
About this high, and
The reason I ask is because on Nextdoor, that app, there's a woman who makes winter housing for cats.
no.
They're just sheets that came in ours. They're not the actual styrofoam boxes. They need the boxes of styrofoam.
Yeah.
Like coolers.
Yeah.
These are just panels.
Oh,
Yeah, they're just
Yeah.
animals, and I
Yeah.
just have such mixed feelings about outdoor cats.
Oh, I know, I understand that, yeah. Okay.
Well, I do too. I have 2 cats, and I used to have outdoor cats, and then I was like, no, I'm done with the outdoor cat. So I got 2 cats so they can keep each other company, which they don't do.
They're cats.
They're cats. But I think I wanted them to grow up thinking they were the only cat in the world, you know. So they're fine. But yeah, it's a mixed thing.
About
You know?
feral cats
Huh?
being out there messing with birds either, so I get that.
The look from the birds, like what are they talking about?
Yeah.
Cats.
They're just going back
So looking over my
so.
Yeah.
Now, if you put out a mouse, quail, and a gopher, would the bird show a preference?
Oh, yeah.
If they had a choice, what?
The owls would all go for the mice.
They what?
The owls would all go for the mice.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure she would go for the quail, because that's more what she would eat, you know? And as long as we can provide them with what they want, we do it. And some days it's just whatever I feel like cutting up, and that's it. Dawn, also, you can show them what else you get up.
Well, I brought Gonzo's favorite treat, which is beef heart, which is exactly what it sounds like.
It's human grade, it's from Hy-Vee.
Yep, so I cut it into little pieces. I'm a vegetarian, by the way. I don't touch any other meat except this and the mice that I feed my snake. All in my freezer next to my veggie burgers, so people would be very confused. But Gonzo loves the beef heart. See, he knows. He knows.
Of course.
I tuck it in to my thumb like that because it more or less mimics how he would kind of go after food in the wild, and he very gently and politely. Oh, man. Good job. Now
Now
we'll
you
see if
more.
we'll see if he'll do this. He might not do it.
This is like Sue down in the lobby.
That must be an inside joke.
This is the thing that I taught him, so I'll see if he'll do it. Be cool. Oh,
What a good bird.
good job now. Again,
And I assume they would eat snakes too,
be cool.
Yes.
Be cool.
but not her.
She's a big city, yes. I once saw a kestrel family, the adults and 3 young, and Dad had the snake, and they were all flying off together for snake lunch. It was very sweet.
Keep going.
Oh, yeah, look at those wings, look at those wings. Look at that. Beautiful. Oh, yeah.
I watched the eagle cam in Cora,
Mm-hmm.
and they're nesting now. I think they lay eggs in January, February. And I noticed that the 3 fledglings from last year are still hanging around with the parents. I just wondered what will happen when they have a new family. I mean,
Yeah, that's interesting. They probably, are they still getting fed from that trout hatchery?
oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure they
So,
are.
the fact that it's a good food source might encourage everybody to stick around. Usually the young disperse, so I don't know why that is. That's interesting. I don't know if the parents will run them off,
Yeah, that's right.
but the parents probably aren't feeding them.
You don't think so?
No. I would almost guarantee it, that there's just good food around and they're hanging, I saw once, I was on a side channel by the Mississippi, and it was a nest that I watched all the time, and Mom was sitting on the eggs, Dad was eating the fish next to her on a branch, and 2 young flew in, screaming, begging and screaming, and at least one of those was not the previous year, because the previous year they only had 1. These were 2 large juveniles, just setting up this ruckus. The 2 adult birds just totally ignored them. They didn't run them off. They didn't share the fish. So I think it'll probably all be fine. Yeah, that's a nice. Are they on both? They're Decorah North now, or they're back to 2? I haven't watched for a
The
while.
babies I saw around north and north, but it looks like they're gonna have 2 nests going this year.
Yeah, they're usually a little bit. I mean, they'll start nesting. They'll probably start nesting late February, March. Is that right?
I don't know.
They're early. I mean, they're really. Those and great horned owls are really early nesters. Yeah, you agree with that.
So maybe you could tell us what your work day is like around these 7 raptors.
Yeah, well, fortunately I have good help. And they work for free, like we all work for free. Fish and Wildlife does not subsidize this, nor does Iowa DNR. So in the morning, I go out and I have 7 birds. They all live in the backyard. They're all in their own enclosure, called a mew. And I just go out and say morning to everybody, because I just want to make sure that everybody is okay. We have had 1 bird die in the past, and so I always go out with some trepidation. switch the watering pans around, put fresh water in. We don't put water in when it's cold. Somewhere during the day, at least she comes out because she pitches a fit if she doesn't come out. And it's, you know, I really just like sitting with her. We have a heated porch, and she and I can sit on the porch and look at the phone and hang out. And then sometimes over the new bar doll often comes in for a bit. Well, if Dawn shows up, Gonzo comes in. Sometimes he comes in with that. Sometimes the real tail comes in. And then somewhere along the day, I go downstairs and cut up all the food. It's a lot of fun, and figure out who's getting what, and I sort of weigh it. And I put some calcium on some of our birds that have quirky issues. And then depending on the time of year, you know, when the weather's warm and it's light late, I'm not in a huge hurry to feed, but now with it getting dark, as soon as we get home, we'll feed. Owls can be fed later because they're not going to eat till dark anyway. Although Reggie sometimes eats when they eat sugar. So that's kind of the day. I harangue people to, you know, help build mews and patch things and put things on. I want to decide if we cover some of the mews in the winter for some of the birds. But like the great horned owl and the red tail, those guys are out here, and even the little one, they're out here in the wild all the time, and so they can do it. So the owls all, the owls all have starvage and they have boxes. So what she means is they're an enclosure on 3 sides with a perch going through it and a roof on the top. And so they can all get into that enclosure to stay dry, except for our owl, who doesn't seem to want to do that. But it's there if she chose to use it. She's a baby.
She likes water. In the summer, you would go in and you put fresh water, and you go back in and lay her feed her. And she'd be sopping wet because she decides to bathe. And, I mean, it looks like a drowned rat. So they're used to getting wet.
Yeah, you know, we love doing it. I mean, it just feels like it feels like a lot of work. I mean, that's really true. But it feels like such an honor to have these birds as part of my life. And I will tell you, it's also bittersweet. You know, it's bittersweet. I wish these birds were out